So I'm really happy to see you.
Introduce yourself. Some of us
I
don't know
sure
who you
will.
are.
I sure will. My name is Tina Liebling. I am a state representative from Rochester and a candidate for governor. I'm going to hand these around to give you a little more information about me, and you'll have my name written down. Okay. Right. So, as I said, I'm from Rochester, and if you can't hear me, please raise your hand. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and how nice of you to say that.
Okay.
And how nice of you to acknowledge that some of us don't hear well.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Very welcome. So, Tina Liebling from Rochester. This is my husband Mark, who just walked in. He's my driver. He's actually on vacation this week, and he's using it to help me get around to talk to Democrats. So, yeah. Thank you for that, because any of us who run for office know that you never do it without full support of your family, because it's a sacrifice for everybody involved. And so I'm sure that all your candidates who've run here locally would say the same thing. So I've been in office since 2005, representing Rochester. I first ran in 2002. And if you remember, some of you, that was the year that Senator Wellstone ran his last race. And he came to Rochester. He, of course, went everywhere in Minnesota. And I had the opportunity as a new candidate to get to know him a little bit. And watching him, and especially listening to him talk about how the big shots, the corporations, the CEOs, the wealthy people didn't need him because they had their own representatives. He was running, really running for re-election at that time to represent the rest of us. And I was very impressed with that, and of course, absolutely loved that opportunity to see him campaign just like everybody did. But that was a very bad year for Democrats, as you might remember, after his plane crashed. It was really, we lost many, many seats, and so I lost as well. And then 2 years later, there's now a hashtag, nevertheless, she persisted. And that's what I did. I persisted. I ran again. Now, Rochester had not had a Democrat in over 30 years before there were partisan elections. So I am the first Democrat elected in Rochester in a very long time. Yes, sir, please.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt here. What made you, as a Democrat, who looks like someone progressive here, win in Rochester?
Okay.
What did you do?
So thank you. You're setting up my speech here.
Can I get my $10 now?
Yeah. That's right.
You get hired.
So I have run always as a bold progressive. I have always run as a bold progressive. I've always been very clear with people about what I was for, and I'll tell you what I'm for. I'm for them. I'm there to make people's lives better, to help them solve problems, and to try to move Minnesota in a way that helps to make people's lives better. I've always been very clear. One of the things I've always been about is single-payer health care, Medicare for all. Woo! And a lot of my work in the legislature has been in health and human services. And you know, that's a very complicated area. But I've always, even while we were implementing the Affordable Care Act, I've always been very clear. This is going to move things forward, but it's not the solution. We need to get the insurance companies out of our healthcare system. We will never solve our problems until we do that. I've always been, thank you, I think, absolutely.
How did you get this out? I mean, what sort of phrases, what sort of messaging did you use to get this
Well,
out?
I've always talked about, and even to Republican audiences, I'll tell you, at times when I've had the opportunity, I think that if you ask people, do you agree that everyone should have health care that they can access without going broke? People will say yes. And I think that as things have gotten worse in the insurance market, I think it's becoming more obvious to a lot of people that we need change. And of course, you know, a lot of the Republicans, they have their philosophical bent. They like the idea that things are private. Everything should be private. But, you know, the cognitive dissonance is there. But let me just be clear, we're never going to win over everybody. And so I am in a district where 40% of my constituents are Republicans. I'm not one of these people who run in the metro area where they might have a district where 80% of their constituents are Democrats. It's just never going to happen, or it hasn't happened in Rochester. So I have always had to run, and in my campaigns, and I have to campaign every single time. I can't just assume anything. I'm in my district campaigning, and I'm not going to endorse, and I'm talking to people, 40% of whom will never vote for me. So you have to, I think part of the answer to that is that we have to work with the people that are persuadable and not be too perturbed by the people who are just never going to vote for us and be with us, okay? I think actions win people over. And so one of the things that frustrates me as a Democrat is that sometimes when we Democrats get a hold of power, we don't use it. We're afraid to use it. We don't use it to do the things that we know will make people's lives better. Because we listen too much to the blah, 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 which is always there. It's always going to be there. And in my district, it's always part of the background. So I think it's very important, especially now as we look toward the governor's race. All of you know how important it is going to be to win the governor's race in 2018. And one of the reasons it's so important is that we could very well have a legislature that's still Republican. Because the Senate is not up for election. They've got only one extra vote on the Republican side. That could change. There could be something happening there. But we still could have a Republican House of Representatives. And if that happens, we need to have a governor not only who's a DFLer, but a DFLer with strong values who can stand up to the craziness that goes on in these negotiations between leaders. And that is something that I feel that I can do well. And really a big reason why I've entered this race, because I have been from the very beginning somebody with a backbone. My background is that I'm a criminal defense lawyer. When you're a criminal defense lawyer, you're fighting for the underdog, and it's tough, right? And that's what I brought into the House of Representatives. And so I've been very outspoken, and I stand up for things, and I've always believed that when the Republicans give us their, blah, blah, blah baloney, that we have to answer. You can't just let things be said and be out there and not respond, because then people believe it's true. Right? So even though we're never going to convince everyone, we have to answer. And we have to answer using simple language. I mean, not talking down to people, but also not worrying too much about all the details. If people want more detail, they will ask. And we need to just let them know very clearly that we are on their side.
So would you say bringing our message down to the level of where people are? Maybe some people are more political, more knowledgeable, and maybe we have to bring our message down more to wherever people are at.
Well, I think there is a way to talk to people.
Right.
And it's usually, in my view, it's a tell people where I stand, even if where I stand is not where they stand.
Right.
So you can say to someone, we can agree that people should have health care, but I have a different idea about how we're going to do that. And I think that works. Yes, sir.
If you need any information in regards to single payer and education, I'm your guy.
Beautiful.
I'd love to help.
Great. Wonderful. Well, I have a clipboard here. And let's see, I think I need a pen. If we
I have a pen.
You have a pen. My driver has a pen.
Amazing how that
That's
happens.
why you're trying to do a good yes.
Yes, he's right. Greatest staff a candidate could ever have. So I'm going to hand this around, and if you're interested in helping my campaign, I would just love that. It would be wonderful. If you're not so sure yet, that's fine too. I have a website on this piece of paper. I'd love you to visit my website, and we can talk some more so that I can tell you a little bit more about me. So one thing my husband sometimes tells me when he watches my speeches is that I don't talk enough about myself. And I really I don't think it's about me, but I do want people to understand where I'm coming from. So I grew up in Minnesota, I grew up in Minneapolis, and my dad was a photographer. He was what you might call a documentary photographer, and he took his kids around the state a lot with him when he photographed the people of Minnesota, which he loved to do. And he photographed people in the coal fields and on their farms and on cold bus stops in the middle of the winter in the cities, and even in the state hospital. And one of the things that he believed and that he really taught me and the rest of my sibs is that the heroes of Minnesota are these people who are working hard every day or struggling. Maybe it's not a job, but they're people who get up every day and deal with the stuff you have to deal with, and they keep pushing forward. They keep pushing forward to take care of themselves, to take care of their families, to help their communities. These are the heroes. In contrast to the heroes, you have the big shots, the people who think that they are better than everybody else, the politicians all too often, the corporate CEOs, the people who think that the world is owed to them, although we don't hear them talk about it that way, but that think that they're special and that they deserve to get. My feeling, just like Senator Wellstone, my feeling is that I'm there for the rest of the people. And that's the way I have conducted myself in the Minnesota House. That's what I keep in front of my eyes. Although sometimes there are legions of lobbyists trying to convince legislators and the governor that the stuff that the big shots want is the way to go and it's for everybody. What I think is that the job of the elected officials is to make sure that when public money is spent, that it's the public that benefits. That we do things that actually help improve people's lives. That Minnesotans, they don't need us to give them a handout. What Minnesotans need is to have the conditions that help everybody rise. And by that I mean things like education. Education is so important. When my dad was a World War II veteran, when he came back, he had the GI Bill. Now he was a poor kid. Without free and scholarship from the GI Bill, he would never have gone to college. But he did, and so did many, many other people. And that raised our whole country up. A whole generation of people that were able to really take a step forward. And what do we have now? Now we have a situation where the public education is so underfunded that a lot of our students can't afford to go, or they go to school and they come out with piles of debt. That is hurting all of us. And it will hurt us more in the future as we have a larger population of older people and a smaller population of younger people who need to be in the workforce and very productive. So I have some ideas about that. I think first of all, we ought to go from K-12 to K-14 education as a guaranteed free education for Minnesota students.